Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of the Towards a Lunar Generation workshop. Our talk today is going to be about business opportunities, entrepreneurship, and innovation. And our speaker is Mani Shah. He is the head of analytics at Bryce Space and Technology. He has helped build Bryce's European presence into a successful business and has managed and executed numerous space and satellite projects over the years, providing business and technology analytics to a wide variety of clients. He's a member of the IAF Entrepreneurship and Investment Committee. IAF is the International Astronautical Federation. And he has also worked with the Space Generation Advisory Council, which is one of the partners of this event for many years, organizing events such as the Fusion Forum and the Space Generation Congress. He is also the co-founder of the London Space Network, which hosts monthly networking events to build and strengthen the UK space community. He has a lot of experience, as you see, in building communities and providing insights into business, and we're happy to have him here today to share his insights with us. Mani, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ali, for that very kind introduction. It's a real pleasure and honor to be invited to present to the Moon Village Association working group. I will be sharing my screen just to share some slides, and yeah, it will hopefully show up soon. Do you see my screen?
We do.
And do you see the presentation mode, or is it the?
We see the speaker mode, I think.
How about now?
We see the presentation mode.
Great. It's all working out now. Thanks, Ali. And yeah, so Mani Shah, as Ali mentioned, head of analytics at Bryce Space and Technology. You're probably wondering, what is Bryce Space and Technology? Well, we're an analytics and consulting firm. We provide objective, evidence-based insights across the space industry. We've supported a number of government and commercial and investor clients on a range of topics, everything from strategy, policy, market analysis, investor due diligence, as well as program execution and delivery. And yep, next slide. So just to mention, you can find some of our reports on our website. They're free to view, no paywall or anything. Hopefully it helps to kind of provide helpful information to the community, everything from startup space trends through to the global space economy. So some of the information you're seeing here is in some of our reports that we publish as well. So just to kind of scene set a bit, what is the space ecosystem? What kind of, this chart is quite good at some, clearly outlining what the space ecosystem is. You've got kind of this value chain, the satellite value chain on one side and the in-space activities on the other, and launch is kind of the enabler of all of that. So on the satellite value chain, that covers off everything from the communications, remote sensing, GNSS, and other satellite-focused activities. That's where it's kind of more on the mature end, if you might, in terms of the commercial demand. The non-government demand for such capabilities. We'll kind of touch into more of that shortly. And then on the in-space activities, there's limited non-government demand to date, modest to be more specific, and significant government subsidies for example, for use of the ISS. There have been only a few tours to date. We've added a few more, shall we say, from Virgin's launch a few days ago. And there's a continuing kind of expectation of growth as the in-space activities grow and mature. And this section is kind of covering more on the satellite value chain side, looking at what are the capabilities that enable those satellites in Earth orbit, and the services they deliver, everything including manufacturing, operations, and also some of the future activities such as on-orbit satellite assembly, servicing, and repositioning. So just this is a nice chart kind of setting the scene of what is the global space economy. And you'll note that it's a roughly $370 billion economy, made up about three quarters of it roughly is the satellite industry, and that includes services, so television, broadcasting, satellite communications, as well as some of the remote sensing, agriculture, change detection, disaster mitigation, the kind of the Earth observation side. In addition, as well, some of the key components of the satellite industry are the ground segment that plays a big part of the ecosystem, as well as, of course, the manufacturing itself and the launch industry. Obviously, launch gets a big kind of visibility, but it doesn't make a fairly, small, relatively small portion of the pie, shall we say? But it is a key enabler, as I mentioned already. And on the kind of the government side, you've got some of the government space budgets and the commercial human space flight as well, making up the remainder of that total economy. This chart is kind of giving you a sense of what is going on, kind of the progression over the last 10 years or so, in terms of the growth in revenues for the satellite industry. So that was that 3/4 segment of the pie. And you'll see that in the last 10 years, the industry has grown by about 1.5%. And in 2020 there was a stability in the growth. It was roughly in line with 2019, considering the circumstances that's of COVID. You've had some increase on the satellite communication side, telehealth, teleworking, etc., and a slight kind of obviously the impacts of the ongoing changing TV viewership habits, resulting in a reduced use of TV broadcasting. Next slide shows you some of the kind of high-level increasing kind of changing industry dynamics. So you're seeing increasing productivity and new capabilities across the different aspects of the space economy. The satellite manufacturing side, you're seeing more capable, lower-cost satellites, improved capability, innovative application of small sats, miniaturization, and some new developments around life extension. On the launch side, you're seeing more affordable launches, increased launch activity, some of the kind of innovative post-launch deployment capabilities, space tugs, as they're known as well, adding that capability in orbit. And that enables those small satellites to reach their desired orbit, particularly when launching on larger launch vehicles. On the satellite services side, you're seeing an increase in the telecom capacity. There's been a huge drive towards high throughput and very high throughput satellites. And obviously there's the increase in players around mega constellations that are looking to deliver broadband to consumers and other customers. You're seeing on the Earth observation side an increase in resolution of the commercially available imagery, not just resolution, but also the revisit capabilities. Planet, for example, has been having multiple kind of pictures of the Earth every day, basically. I think that's something like 10 times a day they get a new view of the Earth's landmass. And then there's new satellite services coming about as well. On the ground segment, you're seeing growing on-the-move connectivity, 6 billion plus GNSS satellite-enabled smartphones, other devices, and broadband satellite radio installations are also on the rise. So that's kind of leading to, on the end user side, increasing productivity, new capabilities, economic growth, safety, security, and sustainability. And some of the typical end users are also mentioned. So that's kind of the traditional kind of satellite industry. And what you're now seeing as well has been, or in the last 5 or so years, has been a dramatic shift in the investment landscape. And it's driven a large part by the billionaires investing in launch capability, both on space tourism, such as Virgin Galactic, but also on the orbital spaceflight. So you've got a lot of investment flowing in, and this risk-tolerant investment is contributing also to the reduction in some of the costs and the capabilities of these space assets. And you see this kind of beautifully illustrated chart, which shows you the relative scale of the different satellites. In the background is also a satellite. You'll see that's also to scale. That's the Telstar 19V, which was launched a few years ago. And this kind of transformation of capabilities on orbit has been driven, by some of the traditional capability, but also with some of the reduced the miniaturization that's been going on. So you compare that with the Planet Dove satellites, which are substantially smaller, and that's what enables that increased revisit, is you having many satellites but smaller. So that's not to say that it's cheaper, or it's a whole lot cheaper, but you're able to get on orbit that capability much faster, and building and scale and the ability to scale up from there is made more. I wouldn't say easier, but more accessible, perhaps. So it's an interesting chart to kind of show that contrast of some of the satellites and how they've been developing. So I touched on some of the risk-tolerant capital that's coming in, and that's basically a startup space investment, the venture and angel-backed startup investment that's been coming into the space sector. And by risk tolerant, what that means is venture and angel investors are kind of able to, they realize there is a fairly high risk to investing in early stage startups, and so the mentality of, okay, let's invest in these companies with the idea that only a few will be big kind of winners that will return outsized kind of returns for the investors. So there was some substantial investment starting from 2015, and this chart kind of nicely summarizes that dramatic shift from 2015 onwards in terms of that private investment landscape. So the next one, and a lot of that investment I touched on was driven by the investment into SpaceX and OneWeb, and also Virgin Galactic. So these 4 companies, Blue Origin included, account for nearly 70% of investment in 2019, and we'll be releasing the 2020 data soon, but it's looking like over $7 billion invested in 2020, which again is a substantial increase. And on top of that, you're seeing a lot of this surge of SPAC activity in the space industry. You saw that kind of start with the Virgin Galactic SPAC in 2019, and that continued into 2020, although there has been some SEC charges against Momentus related to some of the SPAC kind of announcements that they made, but that that has continued into 2021 with in total I think 11, if I count that right, 11 announced space industry SPAC deals announced, with Planet and Satellogic the most recent ones, and that's leading to a combined kind of fundraising of or close to 5 billion just from those SPAC deals, and a combined enterprise value of 23.4 billion. So this is kind of that part of that transformation of the space ecosystem, where you had a lot of this investment flowing in, and now you're starting to see some of these exits start to occur with these SPAC deals, as an interesting approach to those exits. I'm going to speed up a bit now. I'm conscious of the time. So in terms of kind of the launches, again, you're seeing substantial growth in the number of launches, but not just the number of launches, but the total upmass. We do have another chart, but I didn't include it in here, where the total upmass has also been substantially increased, thanks in large part due to the Starlink launches that have been taking place over the last 18 months or so. And this chart is kind of nice overview of all the suborbital and orbital launch sites of the world, around the world. And this includes some of the developing, planned and under development proposal spaceports. You'll see like the UK has 7 planned, so we'll see how many of those make it. And on to the next section around in-space activities. Again, I'm going to have to speed through this, and I'm sure this is the section you were more interested in, but happy to delve a bit more time on this section as well. So these are the kind of in-space activities that I will touch on. Here's a nice chart of the human spaceflight statistics in terms of number of individuals, how many spacecrafts have been into orbit, etc. I'm happy to share some of these slides later as well for you to review in detail. And next slide. This is a nice kind of projected exploration missions for this coming decade by different nations, and then some of them you'll see some are commercial as well, commercial missions. Excuse me. And then the next slide is kind of the moon, the broader market forecast in terms of the evolution of that. I'm not putting this, I haven't put any kind of specific, here is $1 billion opportunity. That's, you know, where would require a substantial additional analysis. But at the start, governments will be the largest, you know, customer for lunar, the lunar market, and you are seeing surface missions, and a lot of that is funded by government, and that starts to evolve into a semi-permanent human presence, and then you start to develop like more of a cislunar ecosystem from 2024 as well. On the commercial side, there are missions around supporting the government activities, and then there's also the dynamic of the billionaire investors supporting some of those missions and leveraging again that government investment. So there's a human landing system, human landing services. The NASA selected SpaceX for, and they received about $3 billion for that, for example. And then on the kind of on-orbit servicing, assembly, and manufacturing, there are opportunities to support some of those planned government missions. And then this chart is kind of an evolution of it's kind of showing high level what the low Earth orbit commercial markets are based on some of the trends. So non-terrestrial resourcing, space resource mining, obviously it's a really challenging one to close the business case on. And then the more nearer term, kind of the US government astronauts and some of the non-US government astronauts as kind of the probability of market success in that sense. And you're seeing the kind of the blue is commercial driven demand and the orange is government driven demand. Okay, that covers my presentation. Apologies, I ran over slightly there. I'll kind of leave the rest of the half hour for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you for the great presentation. We already have one question that I see in chat, and Talini says, it looks like the growth in global satellite industry is plateauing out. What are your thoughts on that? And do you think some of that growth will be transferred to more in-space activities?
I muted myself. That's a good question. And I think absolutely there is kind of an evolving opportunity around some of the commercial initiatives. So you've got the likes of Axiom building their space station, and it's that evolution of moving away from government focused demand in low Earth orbit. So NASA is a big advocate of commercializing the LEO environment, and over time you might start to see, and we've seen some hints of that with some of the private kind of purchases of Crew Dragon missions and other activities, manufacturing in space. Those over time, may be able to at least offset some of that plateauing and help to grow the economy. So there are definitely some interesting upside areas to be excited about. Yeah.
Well, there is another question as well. What are your thoughts on major space companies monopolizing in the in-space sector part of things? And how do you think that can be addressed?
Again, another good question. It's just coming up with all the good questions today. So very interesting. When it comes to improving access to space, what SpaceX has done in terms of reducing the costs has been fantastic, but that, as you say, has run the risk of monopolizing some of that to one provider. So I think government can play an interesting role in terms of supporting additional players. So like what NASA has done with CLIPS, they're able to foster multiple different providers of lunar payload kind of transportation services, and increasing opportunities for other players that are developing capabilities. Developing those capabilities are quite a high capital and endeavor typically, and that means high barriers to entry for new players. So you might see potential collaborations with multiple partners to do some of these things. It was helpful, obviously, that for Axiom, for example, they received $150 million contract from NASA for the kind of the space station module, and then from there on, they were able to also raise substantial fundraising. I think over 100 million is from one of my memory. So that kind of government supporting the private sector in that way, where it's not just giving grant funding, not just giving R&D funding, but giving actual contracts, and that government is a secure customer, where in that if you've got government as your customer, they can then be quite a strong tool for you to then attract further financing to then be able to scale up those activities. So I guess there's the challenge of ensuring you've got the right amount of funding, and then the ability to deliver on that is also crucial. So fostering more of these players is important to be able to ensure not just one or two are doing everything in space.
Victor has a question about one of your slides. So you had a slide where you had the different in-space opportunities, and two of them that were mentioned there were thin film manufacturing and high quality machine parts. And Victor was just curious if you could explain a little bit more how those play a role in in-space activities.
So that's a very specific question. I'll try to take a stab at it in a broader sense. In terms of kind of the space manufacturing angle, what's kind of beneficial from being able to manufacture in space is that on Earth, some of the challenges are with things like exotic Z-blan, which if you were to manufacture on Earth, it's a fiber optic, kind of a very specialized fiber optic for medical devices, kind of military use cases, where it provides much faster throughput through the cable. The challenge on Earth is that you can only produce short sections and you need repeaters to continue that signal. And the reason for why you can only do short sections is that you start to get impurities on the fiber optic over the length. And what you can do in space is you can manufacture these cables for longer length, and that's because you get less of the impurities. It's more uniform in terms of the space environment. You get a lot less of the issues that you get on Earth, and probably didn't explain that in the technical detail that some of you might like, but that's my high-level understanding of some of the kind of benefits of being able to manufacture space. Is you reduce those impurities, and that has benefits not just in fiber optic but other areas, manufacturing alloys, for example, and other manufacturing.
And I'll just add one thing here that is, again, like in different parts of space, whether you're on the moon, whether you're in the space station, the ratio of the different forces that are acting on an object change, and that can be used and engineered to improve manufacturing process. For thin films, for example, a lot of the process relies on surface tension properties of materials sometimes, and that's a major force when you think in space. You don't feel gravity.
Exactly. Yeah.
Joseph had another question. Why are non-terrestrial resource questions such a hot topic in the law and policy circles when the area appears to be low probability for substantial commercial development in the near future?
Why is it a topic that comes up when it's of limited business potential? Is that the correct question? I think it's a fascination with the concept. Maybe it's an interesting idea, and the idea that you've got all this trillions of potential dollars of resources out there, and obviously when people say there's trillions of dollars of materials that you can use, you have to take that with a pinch of salt, because it's talking about the value on Earth of those materials. In a scenario where you were able to bring that down to Earth, you would essentially flood the market, and that price will come down and it wouldn't be as valuable. But in terms of like just the idea that you've got all this material out there, and you can then do interesting things, build structures, and really support the growth of the space ecosystem. So kind of over a longer term, I can see why it's interesting, and it helps think about some of the future opportunities that might be there. That's really why, and there have been a couple of companies that did take a stab at creating business out of resource mining, planetary resources, and deep space industries. Both of which didn't quite make it in the sense of doing resource mining, but clearly there's a lot of challenges in this, both technically and from a commercial business development angle.
You talked about the investments in basically different areas of space activity and different startups. Yeah. Do you have an idea of what proportion of that is going towards in space activities, and in particular like moon-related activities?
So in terms of the investment that's going into the moon-related activities?
Yeah.
Right. So so we know iSpace raised I think $100 and something million, right? So there are investors that are interested in this market, but you've also got some of the CLIPS companies like Astrobotic, Firefly, I think, a few others. I think there's 14 companies in terms of the ones that NASA can select from to provide task orders, and they've given out 6 task orders. So there's that government demand driving interest from investors to say, okay, there's at least a foundational market in terms of supporting this lunar environment, lunar kind of market. But I would say still kind of niche investors who are looking at that. You'll probably take a little bit more time to get more of the mainstream investors, the retail investors, and etc. Onto this. But I think it's a matter of time, really, as the market develops, as there's more customers, and there's clearer idea of where the revenue is going to be coming from. I think that will mature as well.
And our last question for today. Can you tell us a little bit, at least from your perspective, what you think the 5, 10, 50-year horizon looks like in terms of how these markets would evolve and that the investments focus would shift?
Yeah, let me get my magic. So in terms of, is that in terms of the lunar environment or in general kind of?
I think in general, is it going to shift from the satellite side of things towards more in space, or do you think that everything would grow at the same rate?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and 270 billion revenue in terms of satellite industry, and that is a lot of revenues to then be able to have similar revenues in space activities. So I think it will take a fairly decent time to get to the comparable levels of activities, but you're starting to see the nascent signals of that, right? You're seeing in space kind of the lunar markets developing, like the CLIPS contracts were, I think, 100 million. So you're on the order of the low billions, I'd say, right now, and it'll take some time to then grow that into a more substantial market. But yeah, I think that will be interesting to watch for sure. I can't say specifically what year, but that's my kind of general thoughts. Yeah.
Great. I think that ends this session. Thanks a lot, Manny, again for joining us today and sharing your great talk and for answering all of our questions.
No, thank you. It's been really fun and an interesting topic. So thanks for inviting me.
And thanks everyone for watching on Zoom and on YouTube. And